that gets me to what should probably be our last question here. I want to talk about Captain America. I want to talk about evil Captain America or Hydra Captain America.
No, he's evil.
He's evil as hell?
He's evil.
Okay. And I want you to talk about sort of, if you can walk us through a little bit of what happened, where he came from, and then how it relates to our division of Orthodox and heresy. Is Captain America a heretic now? Are the writers heretics? Are the fans who like it the true believers? What the hell is going on with Captain America right now?
Which is funny because that's what Stan Lee calls it, like, hello, true believers. Like, I always think that's really funny that's like one of his taglines for like his fans is like, hey, true believers. Like, So I'm curious to answer that to both of you. What introduced you to Captain America? Like, what was your first experience with that character, and what was he like?
I would be like late 80s comic book shops, because I was not a Captain America fan, honestly, but that was very biased. I thought that he was in the same vein as like Superman. It was very overly patriotic, and especially, and you're talking about like when I grew up in the 80s, it was everything was Cold War driven until like the mid-late Berlin Wall, right? But so a lot of that still was feeding that whole system until things got a little darker into like the early mid-90s. It was still, he had the old colors that were like way too bright, you know what I mean? And it was too much. And so I was never really a fan. I thought it was just kind of cheeseball. And then I went with my brother and my nephew to see the first Captain America movie, and I was pretty blown away. I was like, this is actually a really phenomenal, like, fleshed out character that is complete, even though it is hyper patriotic, it was in a completely different realm of patriotism than the late 80s one that I was introduced to. Does that make sense?
So, that's a weird thing to say, so you really mean from the 80s until 2011, there was not really a version of Captain America that you could latch onto or like enjoy.
I also wasn't actively seeking a Captain America to latch onto or enjoy.
Which is fine. I just think that's pretty telling about his character. I think that
it existed as an idea for me, like Superman. I knew enough about him that I didn't feel like I needed to read comics or stories about him. I was like, okay, I get who that is in the world.
But where did you first experience Superman?
The first Superman movie when I was a kid, and then the Superman. Those pulp comics were actually a lot more available than a lot of others because of everybody knows Action Comics. Even if they don't really know what Action Comics is, they know that that's the birth of Superman. And so there's some iconic old images of him holding the car, and
all my introductions to superheroes were through action figures. Not my own. My cousin's action figures. My cousin was about 3 years older than me and had a whole suite of Marvel action figures and a whole suite of even older DC action figures.
Oh, cool.
So, all the characters were first introduced to me as name, figure, and then whatever the hell my imagination could do with them. But that said, my favorite was a Captain America figure, just because I liked his shield. I think it. As a kid, I was always a fantasy fan, and I liked that he had a shield. It was like, oh, he's like a knight. He's got a shield. And so that was my first Captain America. Was an action figure Captain America. That's cool.
So, I think Cap, first off, has had a really bad time being identifiable in any way now that isn't really Chris Evans, because I think there weren't many versions of Cap available. Like, there was never a Captain America cartoon show. He would star in other things, like he was in the Spider-Man animated cartoon.
Yeah.
I remember one of my favorite things, oddly, was the special that was like Cap and Red Skull were frozen in the stasis chamber with a cosmic cube, and a bunch of villains are trying to break them out. And so he meets Captain America, and I was like, who's that? There was a really awful 90s Avengers cartoon that had, it was meant to sell toys, where they had, like, all this body armor and, like, Ultron is one of the villains. He was, I believe, Cap was in that. I think Hawkeye was the leader of their team. For the 90s were a terrible time.
Was he ever in like the old Hulk show or anything?
Yes.
There's a set. Okay, because there's an idea in my mind of like a 70s live action shitty costume.
Oh wait! The movie?
Is that what I'm thinking about?
Oh gosh. Okay, I have to
Like
take back some
really
words.
bad.
There was. Okay, well, I do have to remember because this is the thing, right? It wasn't actually. In fact, I'll look up this real quick. But I want to say that was right before I was born, so I only ever found out about that movie through TV. I thought it was like a made-for-TV movie, and then it turns out it was because they had a sequel where Steve is on a terrible motorbike and lives in a van, and the villain is Alan Lee. Not Alan Lee. Anyway, Christopher Lee. I want to say that's who. Anyway, yeah. Oh, now I'm remembering that movie. Okay, but I don't recall it being popular. I don't recall. My one friend knew about it, but he liked it because their Red Skull was really hammy, like hammier than usual. But I don't recall when I grew up. So I mean, I was born in '84. So from '84 to Evans, before Evans and after Evans and Captain America, I only remember Cap being a guest star in animated shows at best, and he might be. That was about it. I don't remember anything else for him. So Evans was the definitive version of Cap that I came to both like. I read about some stuff about him in comics, but I only ever decided to go back and read from the beginning as much Captain America as I could find once I saw that version of him because it was so well put together.
Right.
And so like it was just like he's like the Reeves of Marvel, kind of like he did such a good job that I was like, this is great. I maybe didn't realize I liked this character. Yeah. He did a good job. So
why is that? Is it for me? It's because it gives him a little bit more depth and complexity of personality, and maybe some more gravitas for sure, as compared to some other versions of him.
It gives him humility and human kindness, and it's more that he's more than. Well, I think that was the best part of it was the test. Like, hey, if I give you the serum, do you want? Or if I let you in, do you want to go kill Nazis? And I think there would be some version, like the Defenders comic, was a comic about Cap and Namor killing a bunch of Nazis. Like that was what was iconic about that. So I think to contrast what some people may have looked at as Captain America, like yeah, he's World War II, like he punches Hitler. Like it could have been more of he's like he wants to like help the little guy, help people, which I thought was really great and made him more than was a better statement about what America should be than. Did you know the best quality of this American character is that he's super strong and beats the snot out of people?
Well, and the fact that it was self-referential of kind of like what I was talking about of him being this like cheeseball, ultra patriotic idea. Like they touched on that in that first MCU movie.
Yeah,
I think that does some good work for sure. When you're self-referential, it allows yourself to step outside of that kind of predetermined orthodoxy.
Right. So I can't believe that. So the Captain America movie came out in 1990. I can't believe it. It would have come out when I was 6 or 7. That's weird to think about. It felt like it was a movie that was much older. So if you ever want to, go probably find it on YouTube. The 1990s Captain America movie. It's a thing. Anyway, so there's what, and this is more not meant to be a leading question, I guess, but what should Captain America be then? Whether it's the movie version, your idealized comic version. If we were talking earlier about Batman is blank, what is Cap? Like, what should he be ideally? Is you're in your best mindset of if I ever have to read or see another version of this character, he should at least have these qualities.
He should be a virtuous man.
Yeah,
He should be a good man.
Standing up for the little guy, like you said. I think the shield is iconic. You can't really have him without the shield unless he had the shield and he lost it or something. But kind of like we were talking about Bruce Wayne's money earlier, his shield is part of him.
Yeah. Well,
part of that, but maybe
it's
not part of Steve, but it's part of. If he puts on the mask and everything, the shield is absolutely part of Cap. Maybe not part of Steve, because Steve is virtuous too.
Yeah, yeah.
Not just Captain America, but
Well, there's no
the Shield is Cap.
there's no divide between Captain America and Steve Rogers in a Batman sense.
Not in that sense, correct? Yeah.
Because he just is. He's accredited enlisted U.S. soldier.
Yeah, it's a uniform, not a costume.
Yeah,
Right.
and none of it's actually his. It's on loan to him from the U.S. government. Which is always a funny thing. In some comics, they'll mention, they'll be like, "Oh, Cap, I'm going to break your shield," and he'll be like, "It's not mine. It's the government's." Like, please don't break it. So it's really funny that he actually is identified chiefly by things that aren't his. He's just the custodian of
Even his
this
power.
paraphernalia. Yeah.
His power, I mean, it's his only insofar as that he carries it inside of him, but it's not his by birth. You know, it's not any part of his natural being. It was something that was also like given to him.
Yeah. So there have been plenty of versions of other characters that were made to be alternate Caps. Like U.S. Agent is a character that was designed to be, hey, instead of a Cap who was born in an industrial city, let's have someone who was born like lower middle class in the Midwest. Let's have Cap is very socially progressive. Let's have a character who's a little bit more traditionally conservative. So U.S. Agent was like, he's a very famous character who he's not disliked. He's just accepted as, like, he joined the West Coast Avengers, and he was usually the kind of character that would be, hey, I'm the same idea as Captain America, but I represent a different subset of the American dream from a different perspective. Or sometimes they would have Steve, frequently he would get, not frequently, but a few times he's been disillusioned with America, so he would become a character called Nomad. He would get rid of, like, the man with no country. He would forego his American identity or his American symbology to become Nomad. And usually whenever the government betrayed him, or turns out, Steve, your memory was erased, and we tricked you, haha, he'd be like, well, he would always understand when it would be best for him to return back to his title. So Cap is a character that is semi-mutable, but it's like a rubber band. Like, they'll find a way to pull him in another direction, but it's always temporary, so he can spring back to being, like, Captain America. Like, it's always understood that no writer was ever trying to make him new. If they want to do that, they would just make another character that could be his foil or something. So the whole best part about Steve has always been he's a fixed, very iconic, unchanging, classic character that has never had to be different, because that's the point of every other character, is to be, like, that's one of the big hit jobs in comics, was turning Tony Stark slowly into Captain Steve's foil. Like, frequently, most comics, as of the 80s, there would be lots of stories where, I'm trying to remember the name of it now, not the Kovacs saga, Operation Galactic Storm was this big controversial story where, like, a lot of Marvel characters wind up taking part in a huge intergalactic battle, and so they have to decide, what are we going to do with all these Kree that we've been fighting? And so Cap would have one opinion, Tony would have another. It started this tradition of Cap would want to do sometimes the most pragmatic but best thing for the greater good. Tony might want to pick something that's like, well, whoa, like sort of, I think we should do something else. So it created this weird thing to where if you ever wanted to have someone come up with a controversial opinion, it would never be Cap. You would just have another character do it. And that became Tony Stark throughout comic history. If you want a shitty opinion, you have Tony say it, because that's just what he does. Because he's an individualist at heart, so there's really no opinion he could give that would be wrong. He would just say, individually, right now, I feel like saying this. Whereas if you ever had Steve do something like, well, based on my opinion right now, it would seem wrong, right? It just wouldn't seem like what his character would do. So Cap is always, actually, particularly like the virtuous idea, because can you be virtuous, and were there virtuous Nazis? Maybe, yeah. Unfortunately, and that's the big knife twist with this latest story they've been doing with Captain America, whereas they'll keep some of his qualities, but the idea was, Red Skull, classic evil, like, I hate Cap, I want to rule the world type villain, gets a hold. There's some other layers to it, but let's just say he gets the power to have any kind of monkey's paw wish he wants. He decides he's going to use this sentient cosmic cube who looks like a little girl who he's been raising. And she's like, hey, I can do anything you want, Unky Red Skull. What do you want me to do? And he goes, well, if I could have any one wish, it would be, I want Steve Rogers I want to change the past. I want him to have always been a part of Hydra so that he would work for us. Not, let's make him bad right now. Like, let's go back in time and change his past so that he's always worked for me. And this creates a really awkward to talk about meta plot where when you're reading a comic linearly, you get to that issue. So up until that issue, Steve has always been a good person, and he's been virtuous, and he's been Captain America. So your comic reading history is a timeline you already have in your brain that all of a sudden this comic, this storyline is going to start, it has to imply, well, maybe what you've read is wrong, which rubs everyone usually the wrong way because you're going to go, no, it's not. That's stupid. You can't change what I've already read. So the plot they came up with was to say, the history you've read in comic books is a fabricated lie based off of, this is all what Steve thinks. This is arguably not what is real. But the meta-cursive plot in the Steve Rogers, Captain America Steve Rogers is a comic that's got like 20 issues. When they made it, it was after Steve's history has been changed. So they made a comic to show you what this alternate Steve's history. And it's his mother, he still has the same trope. He has an abusive father that beat him and his mother. But instead of having been raised by that and sort of having been taught the lesson of you always get back up, which is a really good sequence where after his mother has been beaten down, it's parallel with him being like beaten down by a robot. He's getting back up, and it's him asking his abused mother, like, why do you keep getting up? And she's like, you never let them keep you down. And so they cross parallel that. So instead of him having been raised under that kind of thing, this woman shows up, kills his abusive father, indoctrinates his mother into a branch of 1930s Hydra that's pre-World War II. So it's the idea that Hydra's always been around before they were Nazis. They're still evil, they just weren't Nazis yet. And that he was indoctrinated into a cult of Hydra. He has an ideal of what Hydra is, that it is a world unifying organization, that disparate countries are a problem. The world has lots of problems. You need the right man at the right time to set things right and unify everyone. It's might makes right kind of crap. And so then, as you keep reading this, it shows Hydra had like Red Skull took over Hydra. Steve felt betrayed because this is not what Hydra is. Hydra is not Nazism. It is fascism. It's fascism, but it's not fascism in the style of Nazis. And Steve hates that. So it's still meant to be, he hates Red Skull. He does not like that Hydra was absorbed by ex-Nazis. So it's still, Steve hates Nazis. Steve hates Red Skull. He's still Steve. He still hates this certain brand of bullying, but he thinks it's just the wrong way to make things right. So it's still this, and there's another character named Baron Zemo who's a long-running Captain America villain. Steve was raised with him like as a kid in this sort of like elite prep school for Hydra agents, and so they become like best friends. And again, as you're reading this comic, it's still meant to be where do these timelines intersect? Eventually, we find out in this fake history, Hydra won World War II. Like, they defeated the Allies. The Allies duplicitously used a cosmic cube and robbed the world of the true Hydra world conquest we deserved. So, in the present, Steve kind of has this moment where he wakes up in that he was indoctrinated into a ritual where Hydra agents say, you're going to go to sleep for a while. When you wake up, you will have lived a life you don't know. You'll still have all your memories, but you're going to realize the world is wrong. And it's going to be up to you to put it right. So when you wake up, Steve, you'll have to make the hard choice, and you have to remember, am I still Hydra? Yes. Should I right the wrongs that the Allies committed by robbing the world of its true heritage? And it's meant, but it's all meta cursive. It's the shit that was put in Steve's head, as far as some readers understand it. It's not real. It's the lie that was put into him, so that when he comes to this, I'm Hydra the whole time, he is sort of like, I finally have awakened. My true origin has been. I know what I have to do now. And he works with Red Skull for a little while. He participates in some duplicitous activity, and then kills Red Skull because he always hated him. He never liked him. And he doesn't want. That's a heresy to him as to what Hydra should be. Hydra is not Nazism. Okay. Hydra is something else. He kills Red Skull because he hates him. And he's like, you should never have co-opted Hydra. You should never have made us Nazis. We hate you. You're dead. And they use lines that Cap had in World War II comics, where one of them was, I'm not loyal to America, I'm loyal to the dream, was one of his iconic lines. And he says that, like, as he's, like, throwing Red Skull out a window. And he's like, no, he's like, you serve Hydra, you serve me. He's like, I was never loyal to Hydra, I was never loyal to you, just the dream, as he throws him out a window. So they take these iconic things that Cap is a true believer, right, but they twist it. And so it's that he's a true believer in something that's not America. It's totalitarianism, but he's still Steve Rogers. He still has qualities that make some writers have wanted to play up that he's bad now, but he's not as bad as everyone he's working with. That his evil Hydra assembled cohort are like, boss, you need to be doing more to, like, beat down, like, there's a uprising in Las Vegas, and so, like, the evil Hydra mustache-twirling council has ideas like, we should gas them, or we should use hypno water, or, like, all these terrible things that Steve's like, we should give them a chance, but eventually they're like, no, you need to prove you're our leader. Do something definitive, and it's meant to be, he doesn't want to have Las Vegas be blown up, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but
yeah.
Steve Rogers is a sleeper agent, wakens to his supposed true heritage, which a normal comic reader who reads the other comics knows isn't real. It's a duplicitous act by Red Skull. He's rewritten Steve's personal history to be something else. And so now he manages to essentially create a scenario where he locks most of the world's heroes outside of Earth and puts up a shield around it to keep all the heavy hitters basically on a suicide mission in space. He puts New York City into the dark hole, or like the dark dimension, because most heroes live in New York City. So he's like, I'm getting rid of New York City. Submerges it into a demonic alternate dimension, and then at the last minute, he's made through legal action. He's been the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a while in the comics. He fabricates this scenario that makes it look like the world is about to be destroyed, and the president says, by Article X, Y, Z, whatever, you are now in charge of the American government. And he's like, okay, we're going to put you into hiding for your security. Until the crisis is resolved, I'm in charge. And so this is kind of understood. And then it's revealed, haha, surprise, he's not going to turn the shield around Earth off. He's going to keep it up, keep all these heroes locked out. He's not going to, he was behind, where did New York go? It disappeared. He sees Washington, D.C., and he basically springs this trap and says, legally, I'm now in charge of the United States of America. I have the only superhero teams of people who are loyal to me on my side. Basically, everyone's going to bend the knee or you get whacked. And so when the comic Secret Empire starts, it's got this time jump of a few years. So has anyone ever, are we all familiar with Man in the High Castle?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is that story. It is America is largely under Hydra rule. There's a line from California is a mutant nation run by just certain mutants that Magneto's the shadow ruler of, and that basically they have a detente. Like, Steve is fine if mutants want to live in Hydra land, but formally he has to declare a state of Cold War between him and this mutant California. Because Spencer said he wanted to base a lot of this off Man in the High Castle. So it's got this. Then it has if you've ever seen the movie or the TV show, it's what would America look like under strict authoritarian rule. Well, crime is down, everything's doing well. Our test scores are up. Like
Right.
it's that kind of an environment. But no one, unlike some other comics where everyone might secretly be, there's not a lot of characters who are. The American populace is really kind of happy.
So
Just because it's Captain America who's done all this, and even some characters will go, "This is Hydra." In World War II, they were Nazis, and some characters will go, "That's just fake liberal news. This is Captain America. We trust him. It's Steve, so he would never betray us, so it's okay. This must be for the greater good." And the big kicker has been that he's been able to pick up Thor's hammer, and that any other characters that may have had some qualms about do we fight Steve have been silenced by, for whatever reason that has not fully been explained. He's considered worthy by Mjolnir, and now is considered like he saved the world even if we don't like it. He's picked up Mjolnir. How can that happen? For whatever reason, no one knows, but it scared God into all these characters, and so it's created a comic environment of Steve's on top of the world, but he has no compassion for his enemies, so he'll kill anyone, even if he may kind of boo-hoo about it a little bit. He kills a character named Rick Jones. He has Las Vegas get blown up for dissent. He is pretty much thinking that to save the world, it must be Hydra, because that was the world that should be, that was robbed from us by the evil, duplicitous allies that we've been fed a lie our whole lives. He's finally come to his true mission and saved us by saying, we're going to make the world right again. I'm here to tell you your past is a lie. Believe me, Hydra is really the good guys. You've been listening to a load of anyone who tries to say Hydra is Nazis. I hate Nazis, so you should believe me. But he's still an authoritarian.
And this is still in production right now.
Yeah, they're up to the second issue out of 8 or 9.
Okay. So, maybe in conclusion, we could ask, is this current Captain America a true heresy? And feel free to give a short answer on that.
Well, do y'all think, so in that situation of, if you have a Captain America that isn't American, that's fascist, or totalitarian, would there ever be an acceptable totalitarian America?
I mean, is that your answer? Is your answer a non-answer?
So I think that
is this Captain America a heresy or not?
he is, just because by virtue of its Red Skull that did it. I think
All right.
As a non-meta answer, anyone who reads it knows this was not something he did naturally. It was done to him.
Right.
But
Yeah, you said a monkey paw wish.
Yeah.
And it will disappear eventually.
So Rick Remender, the writer, has said frequently that whatever's happening will not be wished away. It will not be cosmic cubed out of existence. So what's pissed some people off is, with lots of issues of comics, there'll be one issue that gets people really mad. And last year, the reveal that he was a Hydra agent was the big, it got people really mad. The next issue was, you then found out this was done to him by a cosmic cube. The Secret Empire event that's been going on. The first issue is this is Steve. He now rules the world totalitarian style. He's super bad. The next issue ends with a Steve Rogers with a bescraggled beard in this somewhere else. It's unknown if it's the real world, if it's Steve's subconscious, and it's just him in his World War II fatigues who rescues a young woman from some kind of snake monsters in the woods. And he's like, my name's Steve Rogers, I'm just trying to get home. And so it's questionable, are there two Steves? Did one Steve get switched? So it's a way to preserve if you like your Cap being pure, true, unadulterated, good guy material, that he may still exist out there as a dream somewhere.
Yeah.
But some people I have friends who don't like aspects of America, and especially so one of my friends he's a minority, and he has a very conflicted view of America, and he's got a very conflicted view of Captain America because he loves X-Men. Captain America has been brought in a lot of times to put the boot heel on the X-Men's throat. to say, I represent America, you're going to do X, Y, or Z. So he has a history of not liking Cap too much and seeing him as a quasi-fascist character that has done a lot of things to minorities. And so that aligns more with what he has viewed. So he loves. They're like, yes. He's like, good. Get all this out in the open. Make a Captain America that's bad. You should not be afraid to have that, so we can have this conversation of what do we not like about America? What do we want to have? We can point at and go, this is bad. When America does these things, there's a lot of Trump parallels to now that Steve is ruling the world.
Sure.
There's some Trump parallels that some people argue has been Remender's whole, or Spencer's whole point.
Yeah.
He was never looking to idealize Nazis by making Cap bad. He was looking at saying, America doesn't always do the right thing. How would we have the best conversation? Let's have Captain America go back.
That's fascinating.
So I think the meta-cursive answer is no, this Steve isn't a heresy. Or what's going on has been done to Steve means he's not pure, but that character is a legitimate Captain America. It just may not be the Captain America everyone wants to talk about.
That's interesting. Well, should we conclude?
Sure. I want to say thank you, Michael Greenhill, for being here and talking with us.
Thanks for your extensive knowledge. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's too much, and that's why some people stay away from comics, because there'll be people like me sometimes who are like, if you have to...
like you.
Well,
we might need a follow-up episode, because I have a whole list of other questions. One on paper that we didn't even get to, and then just ones I've been coming up with.
Is this about Neil Gaiman?
Oh, I mean, some stuff about that, but I mean, just even about... I mean, all kinds of things.
Awesome.
Maybe we can wrap up at another time or something.
All right. Well, that was Grad Lads. Thank you for listening.
Then what's the name of this episode? Grad Lads in the case of...
Well, I think we'll let you come up with it. What do you think?
Grad Lads in the Hydra Heresy?
I like it.
That's good.
All right.
It's like it's Steve, like hovering